What's up guys, it's Lord Bothy here with another video, and today's video is about Cyberpunk 2077. And wait a second, Cyberpunk is making headlines? Didn't that game come out years ago? Well yes, you would be correct. However, plans for a new game is already in development from CD Projekt Red, and it seems that CD Projekt Red is already putting their foot in their mouth. Now, as you may remember, when Cyberpunk 2077 came out, it was not met with great praise. It had been hyped as the edge of gaming, something colossal in new fashion, something that was going to break the mold in terms of gaming, a new high-end gaming experience set in a cyberpunk world. Some argue that it was even so hyped that it could never really live up to the expectations. However high the expectations though, it's quite obvious when the game was released, it was far from anything anybody expected. It wasn't even buggy, it was glitchy, the graphics were awful in terms of performance. In a lot of cases on the older gen consoles like the Xbox One or the PS4, you had the game essentially looking like it came out of the early 2000s. Essentially, when it came out, Cyberpunk 2077 was a mess. And it stayed a mess for quite a long time. It took years for CD Projekt Red to essentially dig themselves out of the hole they created with Cyberpunk. And after they had built up such good credit with the masterpiece that was The Witcher 3, they had thrown it all away with this game. But after years of hard work, they've finally gotten Cyberpunk 2077 to a point where it should have been at release. However, a recent article being published has raised some eyebrows when it comes to the development of the second game. This article comes to us from IGN entitled CD Projekt Devs Want to Push the Envelope with Social Issues in Cyberpunk 2077 Sequel. The article states, Cyberpunk 2077 developer CD Projekt Red recently discussed the future of the RPG series and where it still has room to grow in its upcoming sequel. The project is codenamed Project Orion. One hope the studio has for its upcoming sequel is to do a better job of pushing the envelope in its commentary on social issues. Associate Game Director Paul Sasko is quoted as saying, I see that we didn't push the envelope far enough in some places, for instance. Like, let's say, the homeless crisis. When I look at it, I'm like, we weren't far enough in. We thought that we were dystopian, but we just touched the surface. Dan Hernberg, executive producer for Project Orion, agreed with Sasko by stating, I think the really cool thing about Cyberpunk and the dystopian future that it has is that there is so much relevance to today, of megacorporations, of people on the fringes, of people just being exploited resources, of the wealth gap. I think that 2077 allows us to tell these stories in ways where, at the heart of it, there's always relationships and people, but we're in a really broken world and that we can call out some of these things. I think for me that's what Cyberpunk is about, exploring those themes but in a very poignant way. I love the world and I think that's what we're going to try to do with Project Orion. Really continue to lean into that and continue to say what's the state of the world today and what does it look like in a couple of years. Now, part of me agrees with Sasko. Playing Cyberpunk 2077, I did notice that a lot of the dingier parts of the cities, homeless encampments, things like that, were very sparsely populated as opposed to larger parts of the metropolis city. Also, I would argue that all the cyber psychos in the game are far less terrifying than the Portland fentanyl zombies you find wandering the streets at night. So if you want to emulate the real world more, as he and Hernberg said, there's a good place to start. However, the whole theme of the article is something I just can't get behind and just fully disagree with. While there is social commentary in Cyberpunk 2077, and Johnny Silverhand's story obviously has to do with that, the game at its heart is a story about people. It is a humanistic story that relates people to each other, not more to major themes of society. Those major societal backgrounds are crux for the struggles between the major characters. But the major characters and their goals and desires deal with more than just these societal problems. They're also personal struggles and personal vices. They deal with loss, they deal with rapid change, they deal with arguments of the consciousness and even what is considered oneself in terms of that consciousness. The fear is that the next Cyberpunk game will focus very deeply on the societal problems at hand and lose the human element in it that was really the crux and selling point of the story, which is, quite honestly, very good. Despite the flaws on its release physically, the story is quite compelling. And if you're going to have political and social commentary in your game, I can tell you right now, gamers and society at large are kind of fed up with that. Don't have references and metaphors to problems people see currently in society. People don't play these games to try to be reminded of current problems or struggles. They play these games to have an escape, even if that escape means that there are other societal problems in the games that they play. But they rather play the game and solve the problems easily there than have to deal with the problems that are quite more complicated and not as easy to solve in real life. That's the nature of the escapism of video games. And lastly, with the disastrous release that Cyberpunk 2077 had in terms of its actual performance on consoles and the way it looked, the way it behaved as a game, I think CD Projekt Red should be far more concerned with actually putting out a game that's functional and performs, that looks good and is ready on release. Not something that's a buggy, glitchy, disgusting looking nightmare that takes years to fix. Trust me, normie gamers would much rather have a game that looks good and functions well at release than a game that looks terrible but has a lot of wealth in terms of societal commentary. But anyway, these are just my thoughts on the current article and the current beliefs of the developers of the next Cyberpunk 2077 game. If you have your own thoughts on this subject, go ahead and leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I appreciate you listening to all of it, and we'll talk to you again later.